Welcome to Therapy in the Great Outdoors, the podcast where we explore the business and practice of nature-based pediatric therapy of all kinds. If you're an outdoor-loving pediatric practitioner in the fields of occupational, physical, or speech therapy, social work, or mental health, this podcast will help you start and grow a successful nature-based practice or program. I am the ever honest, always 100% real, you'll hear it all on this podcast, Dr. Laura Park Figueroa. I'm a pediatric OT with over 20 years of experience, and I run a thriving nature-based practice with profitable locations in 2 different states and multi-six figures in revenue. I also host the free online community at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com to help you pursue your nature-based therapy dreams too. Are you ready to take action on those dreams? Let's jump in. Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about how you can become a certified nature-based pediatric therapist or therapist assistant with the Contigo Approach. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown of the history of the Contigo Approach and walk through some of the changes we made to the certification process and why we made those changes to better serve you. So the history of Contigo is 5 years old. Actually, it was almost exactly 5 years ago that I launched the first in-person training for the Contigo Approach. And we had 27 people attend that first in-person training. And I still remember mailing an $8,000 check to the retreat center and being very afraid that I was going to lose $8,000 because at the time in my business, that was a lot of money and kind of still is a lot of money. Even though my business is making a lot more money now, it still feels like that's a good chunk of change, right? And I remember just being overwhelmed with excitement when 27 people came. That was just such a wonderful time of being together. And that was November of 2019. So we all know what happened in March of 2020. I had 3 other in-person retreats planned in 2020 because it was just such a great experience that I wanted to do it over and over and do all these in-person retreats. And I paid like $4,000 down to the retreat center, and then COVID hit and we had to transition to offering the Contigo Approach as an online program instead. And I will say that has been really amazing as well. Like it has proven to be a great opportunity for people from all over the world to be able to access Contigo, and it's much more affordable. I think it makes it more accessible to a wider variety of people in order to not have to pay for your travel and the time away from your family and all of that. It makes it more accessible and that people can access it at home, and they can do it kind of not in a fast way by doing it in person, but take their time and really delve into the information. Okay, so we switched in 2020 to it being a cohort-based model. So this was basically like we would open for enrollment for a week and people would enroll, and then they would do the mentoring calls for like 4 weeks in a row, basically a cohort. You'd go through it with the people that signed up when you signed up. And at the time, I think we've always offered it like you get everything. You get lifetime access and all of that, and you don't have an expiration date. So there are people still inside of the program essentially who took it 4 years ago, and they still have access to any updates that we make. For me, that is the simplest way to run the program in my business. I just like the idea of offering something to people that they know they will get future updates. And that's kind of cool to know that if this is something you really want to do, which you wouldn't really enroll in the program if this wasn't something you really wanted to do in your work as a therapist or therapy assistant, then you know that you have access to all the future updates that we make. And I just think that offers a lot of value to our customers. And so I am proud that we have always chosen to do it that way and not given like a deadline. I will talk though about how deadlines drive decisions in a little bit. But so we had it as this scheduled calls with cohort. And what happened was I got really burned out on launching it and selling it because anyone who runs an online business, and I think unless you have run an online business, you can't even understand this, but 90% of what you need to do is marketing. It's not the design of the product. It's not the edits to the product. It's not delivering the product. 90% of the work that you do, that it will feel like the work that you do, is just getting the word out about the product or the offer even existing. And so I got really tired of having to promote it all the time in order to enroll new cohorts. And so I moved to a model where it was open all the time and people could enroll anytime they wanted, but it was through a webinar. Some of you may have joined this way. It was through a webinar. I offer a webinar and then you have like 7 days to join after you watch the webinar. And then you're locked out from buying for like a period, I think it was of 3 months or something. So it was kind of like an automated enrollment that was limited. You know, you had to watch the webinar in order to access the enrollment link, but then you were locked out of buying. It was a real actual close of the enrollment because you were locked out of buying for 3 months after that. So we ran it that way for about 18 months, I want to say, a year, 18 months. And the thing I didn't like about that model was that I felt like I didn't know people as well. And some of the changes that we made to the certification program actually are because of me wanting to know people more who are in the program and wanting to deliver better on our promise that Contigo will give you everything you need to become an expert in nature-based pediatric therapy. So I'll talk more about that in a bit. We did it that way for 12 to 18 months. And then the calls were kind of weird in that model because we did like monthly calls and people could join any call at any point in time. So because it was kind of an individualized cart open and close with the webinar, people were always coming into the program randomly, right? And then they would join us at like the next monthly call that we did. But I just felt like those monthly calls didn't give us enough like togetherness in order to really get to know one another. So now the way we offer it is a scheduled cohort 3 times a year. So we open enrollment on a schedule every year, and I'm going to do this the same next year because this seemed to work really well this year. We just open enrollment at the end of January, at the end of April, and at the end of September every year so that people know that if they don't join in January, they'll have an opportunity to join in April, or if they don't join in April, they'll have an opportunity to join in September. For cohorts that run in whatever the month is after the enrollment, so February, May, and October. So now we have these cohorts where people join during one of those open enrollment periods, and then they come to the classes right after that. You're not required to come to all the classes right after that, but as part of certification, we are requiring now that you attend a call for module 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the program content. And again, I will talk more on that in a bit. So that's kind of how we're offering it now. We got AOTA, the American Occupational Therapy Association, approval as an approved provider last year. And when we filed for the Contigo program to be a certification and to give CEUs through AOTA, let me correct that. To give AOTA approved continuing education units, we got approval to give 6 hours, and that was based on requiring therapists to watch the content that is in the program for the main modules. That's like barely a third of the content in the whole program, and then to pass the quizzes for each of those. The reason that we made some changes to this is because we didn't feel like that was robust enough, basically, when we were thinking about what is our promise, right? There are other nature-based programs that are cropping up, and we want to really be the best. We want the Contigo approach to be seen as the gold standard in nature-based therapy certifications for people who work with children. And so in order to do that, that obviously would take longer than 6 hours of your time, okay? So we wanted to make good on that promise of giving you everything you need in order to become an expert in nature-based pediatric therapy. To do that, it required that we revamp the whole certification process. So we realized that people had access in the current program to everything that they needed. So we give mentoring, we give lifelong access to the community, we give loads of resources and a goal bank and a workbook and all these things that go along with the pre-recorded content that is inside of the program. We have the calls every few months. We're doing those 4 weeks of calls. But people had access to all of that, even when we were doing the certification before for the only 6 hours of CEUs. But what they really needed was accountability, because people are going to rise to whatever you ask of them. And when we only required the 6 hours, people only had to do the 6 hours. And so the accountability was not there in order to do more and to go deeper in the work. And so we are going to do a massive change. We are in the process of making a massive change to the certification process. And we've actually rebranded and renamed the program Become a Certified Nature-Based Pediatric Therapist or Therapist Assistant in the Contigo Approach. So we're not leading with the Contigo Approach anymore. We're actually leading with this idea of obtaining the certification, of becoming an expert, because that's what we want this program to be. And so now I want to share some of the changes that we made and why we made those changes to the certification program that we offer. So the first thing is that we are requiring those mentoring calls. We were not requiring them before, mostly because of the logistics that AOTA requires for attendance and stuff. But I've kind of developed some systems in the business now to make it really easy to check attendance and to verify that in order to certify people. And so we are going to require the calls. And the reason for requiring the calls is so that people can get to know each other and they can take risks and they can be in community and actually show up and engage with other people to help process the learning that they're doing. I think this is so important, and it takes time and energy, and it takes the ability to be brave and put yourself in a situation where you need to share vulnerably and you need to share questions that you have and you need to maybe share things that you don't know and that you're wondering about. And I think that's the type of learning environment that I want to be creating for people inside of Contigo. When calls were not required, we did have people attend calls, but the majority of people were not attending calls. Upon reflection, that is a very key part of being able to really apply what you learn inside of the program. So we're requiring those calls in order to help people apply what they're learning. The second thing that we are doing is we've created some experiential learning activities that people are going to be required to do in order to become certified. These are things like treatment planning, a session in alignment with the Contigo Approach, and then doing reflection afterwards. Another thing we're going to have people do is conduct a nature connection assessment with a child and report back to the community about what that experience was like. So there's a variety of different things that we are going to have people do inside of the program, but they all are very intentionally designed in order to help people, again, deepen the learning, integrate the learning, really make it part of how they think. I taught in a master's and doctoral program for several years in an occupational therapy program. And one of the things that I love doing is creating meaningful learning experiences for students. And so I realized that I hadn't really done that when thinking about how to certify people in the Contigo Approach. And so what these experiential learning activities are is an application of my thinking about how do adults best learn, and then giving you opportunities to apply your learning about the Contigo Approach in real life so that it does become more hands-on and more real to you and more doable in your actual practice. And finally, the third thing that we are requiring is that people participate in community. So this is something that I have wanted for a really long time, to form more community around Contigo as a approach that people are using in their practice. And that's been really challenging for me to do. And I want to share a little bit of a vulnerable story with you all, because this is something that I think, honestly, I think it's a weakness of mine, but I also don't know if it's a weakness or if it's that I have mindset issues around it because of this unfortunate experience that I went through. I worked as a wilderness backpacking guide right out of college, and I had a mentor that I really looked up to in that community. I worked at like a base camp, and then we would lead backpacking trips in the Colorado mountains for high school students. So when you weren't leading a trip, you were in camp working, like at base camp, doing different things around camp to help the camp run, like packing food for the next week or whatever it may be that needed to be done. I can't remember all the details, but there was some big project that we had going on in base camp, and I complained to a peer of mine that it was kind of busy work because something they were asking us to do was just going to be something we had to redo the next day, and it was no big deal to wait one day to do it. I felt like they were just kind of generating busy work for us to do because they wanted us to do something that day. So I made some comment to a peer, and one of my mentors that I highly respected until this moment looked at me and said, "Laura, you are an infection to this community." And it just has stuck with me over time. Like that negative thing that was said to me about me being an infection to community. And I know that's not true. As my 48-year-old self, I can know that's not true because I'm not 23 or 24 anymore, however old I was. But it was just such a shameful thing for me to be told that I was an infection to community that I think I've held that for a really long time. And it has been like a mindset block for me. And like, how do I, as someone who I know that I have been told by people my whole life that I'm intimidating, and I try really hard not to be. I don't know how to not be. I don't know why I'm intimidating to people, but I've been told that, and it's a struggle for me because I want to be someone who fosters community. I want to be someone who brings people together. I want to be someone who celebrates people's strengths in community and celebrates like sharing of information across disciplines and free sharing of information with one another. And I, for some reason, feel like I have struggled to do that with people who have taken the Contigo program. And so I have some ideas as to why maybe. I mean, I do feel like we didn't really have a community space until about a year ago. And so maybe that's part of it, is like people didn't have a space that they could interact. And, you know, because we weren't requiring the calls either, I think that's another piece of it. So all these changes are kind of intended to really bring people together and help people form relationships and community around being Contigo therapists. People who have taken this training and like understand the approach and implement it in practice. One thing I think too is I have often said I want people to be able to use as little or as much as they want of the Contigo approach in their practice. So I do know that there are people who are using elements of the Contigo approach, but you know, they wouldn't say they're a Contigo therapist necessarily. And so I guess that's fine. That's beneficial as well. But I feel like I'm rambling now. Sorry, y'all. But I do just want to really lean into this idea of how to form community. And particularly if you are someone who is not an OT and you have taken the Contigo program or you are thinking about it, I'm really interested in like partnering with you to learn how I can make the Contigo approach more approachable for people from other disciplines, and how we can all kind of come together to really make the approach something that applies in all different disciplines in even more ways than it already does. So I would love your help in making this more of a community. So if you have ideas, feel free to share them with me. I would love to hear. Again, the reason I'm going to wrap up here, but the reason for all of these changes is that we want to deliver on our promise to help you become an expert nature-based pediatric therapist or therapist assistant. So that involves time and energy and effort and being in community and accountability to get all of these things done in order to show that you are an expert and to really feel that in your bones, that you are an expert. You have really earned the right to say, I know what I'm doing as a nature-based pediatric therapist or therapist assistant. You can feel confident that you know what you're doing, that what you're doing is evidence-based, that you have a whole community behind you when things don't go well. Because part of being an expert is being able to admit when you don't know and when things don't go well. And when you have the Contigo community behind you, you have a group of people that you can go to say, oh my gosh, this totally flopped, or I had this problem. What would you do? This is what I did. It's a place to debrief. It's a place to have community with other therapists. We really are the only program that guarantees to give you everything you need to become an expert in nature-based pediatric therapy. That is, I will stand by that, and I guarantee that. I know that we have the resources in this community to support you as you go from beginner to complete expert, or from, intermediate to complete expert, because I know a lot of you come into Contigo with experience as well. The last thing I want to say is we did not raise the price of Contigo. We decided to keep the price as is. And I often think in other industries, this would be worth like $20,000, like all of the stuff that we're offering in the program. And so I really do try to price things competitively and to keep it affordable for all of you. We have monthly payment options for those of you who need it. And so we decided to keep the price as is and still offer this like more robust certification program to support all of you. So I think that's it for today. We are open for enrollment this week from September 23rd, 2024 until September 30th, 2024 at 5 p.m. Central is when enrollment will close. So you can join us inside of the program and become a certified nature-based pediatric therapist or therapist assistant with the Contigo Approach. I'll see you next week. Bye.